Welcome back to the Siri Poetry Library. I'm your host, Daniel Siri. And we're going to start off with the Star Wars Haikus. I started this project 2014 when I was reading at the Revolutionary Lounge in Toms River every Tuesday night. And I finished it about a year ago, 2020. I had to wait for number 9 to be out. When I first started writing it, there was only 6 Star Wars movies, but we knew that there was a new trilogy on the way. So I thought to myself, well, this might be cool. And then every couple of years, I'll do 7, I'll do 8, and then I'll do 9. So we'll start with The Phantom Menace. Naboo under siege, hope found on a desert world. A journey begins. Attack of the Clones, a missing planet. Lost Jedi instigates war. Shroud of Darkness falls. Revenge of the Sith. The Knights are betrayed. War ends with a tyrant's reign. A new hope is born. A New Hope. Droid holds secret plans. Luke learns ways of his father. Skywalkers lose homes. The Empire Strikes Back. Deadly Cave of Ice. Miry pit of the dark side. A dark temptation. Return of the Jedi. Twins reunited. Rebels are victorious. Celebrate the love. The Force Awakens. Sun lost to darkness. Luke's saber finds the true heir. Lost hope awakens. The Last Jedi. Spark of resistance. Peace by saving what we love. Rebellion reborn. The Rise of Skywalker. A demon rises. Family is more than blood. A new Skywalker. And we'll probably need some black coffee for this, because now I'm going to basically talk about Star Wars until I stop talking about it. The original film was everywhere when I was born. I had 2 older brothers, so there was Star Wars posters and toys and books, and it was all over the house. Stickers, all kinds of things. Saw the movie in bits and pieces, mostly on video disc, which was an old format. Basically, the movie was on a vinyl record, and you'd fit it into the player, take it out, and the disc would play. The video and audio was okay. The only problem was, since it was vinyl, it could get scratched, and it could skip within the player. And there was a lot of scenes that would skip or skip around, and we'd have to rewind back to rewatch them. It was very impractical. That was 82, 3, around there. I was supposed to see Return of the Jedi in the theaters in 1983 when I was about 3.5, almost 4. But we'll get to Return of the Jedi in a second because there's a funny story about it. Empire Strikes Back came out on video disc in 1985 and videotape. We still had the video disc player, which was a cheaper format at the time because it had lost the format war for some time. VHS and Betamax were battling it out. But video discs you could still get pretty cheap. And for, family with 4 kids, that was a good way of us amassing a pretty nice-sized movie collection for very little money, because it was done. The video discs were finished. So even though we knew that we did have a VHS tape player given to us by my grandmother, Camilla, which was very nice of her, we mostly used that VHS player to record things off of TV. Don't Worry, Motion Picture Association, and Mets baseball. Those tapes are long gone, so nobody's going to come after us for recording a couple of Met games in 85 and 86 and whatnot. But we didn't buy videotapes because videotapes were very expensive. It was a rental industry, not a sales industry. So videotapes would run you about $50, $40 in there. So we bought The Empire Strikes Back instead of VHS. We bought the video disc for pretty cheap. So this way we could watch The Empire Strikes Back a million times, which we did. I had seen it, the story. I knew the story from the kids' storybook and from the comic book, which my brother Tom had. And that's how I knew the story. I had never seen the film. So it was pretty cool, the anticipation of waiting to see The Empire Strikes Back on the movie for the first time. We had the Super 8 film, too, of Star Wars and Empire, which was basically like a 12 to 15-minute version of the film. You can actually find them on YouTube, which is quite exciting, rather than me bringing out the old Super 8 projector. Now, for Return of the Jedi, there's a great story. 1983, we all went to see it as a family. My parents were taking us. I was a little afraid to go see it in the movies because I was still very young, and dark places tended to upset me quite a bit. The reason why I was so upset going into Jedi was I was looking through the Marvel comic, which my brother already had, and it pretty much spoiled the movie for him because he found out everything that happened in the film, more or less. The only thing they didn't show in the comic book was what Darth Vader looked like with the mask off. They saved that for the film. Which, when you finally see it, you're like, it's not so bad. He looks, it doesn't look good, but I thought it would be much worse than what it ended up being. Irvin Kershner once spoke about how he would have never done that if he directed Return of the Jedi, because he was asked to direct, and he told George Lucas, no, I'm exhausted, because making The Empire Strikes Back was a horrible experience for Irvin Kershner. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of long hours, a lot of over budget. And it was the sequel to the most successful movie of all time. So he didn't want that kind of pressure again. And then the build-up for this movie was great. And I saw some things in the comic book. I, peeked through it. I didn't want to know too much. But I was a little bit worried. I was a little concerned. I had seen some images of Darth Vader. Now, Darth Vader on TV is not so bad, but in a movie theater, it was going to be very intimidating and imposing. Then I saw Jabba the Hutt, and I'm like, oh, this is worrying me. And I saw some of Jabba's friends, and I'm like, a little kid watching this stuff. And I didn't need to see Empire Strikes Back because my brothers already told me the entire story of the movie, more or less. So we were all set to see Return of the Jedi. So we get to the theater, the Fox Plaza in Staten Island, which was in Highland Plaza. Do not look for the theater. It's long gone. But I believe it was a 2-screener, and Return of the Jedi was playing there with something else that nobody was going to see. The line was around the block. This was back in the days when you had to wait on long lines for a movie. Part of the reason was there was only one screen. Another reason was that you used to be able to buy a ticket those days and see the movie as many times you wanted. You could basically walk in at any point and sit there for another screening, which is what we usually did. That ended in the mid-'80s. So basically we're waiting on this long line, and I'm okay with the line, and then we're in the theater, and we get popcorn and candy, and I'm still kind of worried, but I'm not saying anything, so I don't want to ruin it for everybody. So we sit in the theater. We all have our seats. The movie's about to start, and everybody's excited, and it's great, except me. I was close to panicking. Didn't want to be in the dark, didn't want to see all these monsters, particularly the Rancor monster. There's a very frightening panel from the comic book of Return of the Jedi, which I don't have here to show you. It's in the next library, next wing. But basically the Rancor, spoilers, gets killed by Luke Skywalker, and its head gets crushed. But in the Marvel comic, it's got a big splash of blood flying out, and I'm like, this is like horrifying. So I'm sitting there, fine. The lights go out. And I'm like, I can't do this. So basically, my dad had to take me out of the theater. And we basically walked around Highland Plaza until the movie ended for about 2 hours and change. Everybody's waiting online. Everybody's, for the next show. My siblings, when it was over, they were still in the theater. My mom came out by herself. And he's like, what's going on? He's like, well, the kids are still in the theater. You have your ticket. You can go in and join them. They're going to watch the movie again. And he's like, look, I just walked around Highland Plaza for 2 hours. I don't want to see the movie now. I just want to go home. I'll watch it another time. It's fine. So in front of the line of hundreds of fans stretching all the way to Highland Boulevard, my mom very loudly says to my dad, you've got to see this movie. Darth Vader turns good. So, that was Return of the Jedi. Now, should we do the prequels? Oh, man. Long story short. No, it can't be short, though. It's the prequels. It's going to take forever to explain. All right, we waited 16 years. There was a lot of anticipation. There was the Star Wars Special Editions, which were their own story for another time. But we were looking forward to the prequels for a long time, very much anticipating these films. The trailer, November of '98, was one of the most exciting things we'd ever seen. To this day, it's my favorite movie trailer. It's not my favorite movie, but it's a great trailer because we just couldn't believe that Star Wars was back. It was just so bizarre to see lightsabers again, and then Darth Maul with the double-bladed lightsaber. I'm like, this movie's going to be incredible. And I was actually, before the movie was made, I was tracking all the actors to see what other films they were in. So I rented like The Professional and Trainspotting and Jingle All the Way and a bunch of other movies. Liam Neeson I pretty much knew. I'd seen a lot of his work and I was a fan, but I didn't know the other actors. I didn't know who Ewan McGregor was. I didn't know Natalie Portman or any of these people. So I was seeking out a lot of their work, and I'm like, I saw Ewan McGregor in Trainspotting. I'm like, this guy is amazing. And I saw Brassed Off too and a few others. I saw Natalie Portman in The Professional, which became one of my absolute favorite films. And it still is to this day. It was actually a big influence on a story I wrote some years ago called Dawn, which was about an assassin. A homeless girl gets adopted by a mob family, becomes an assassin, which owes a great debt to The Professional, also Gloria, and many other, low-budget films. But we saw the movie, and it was just a very weird experience. We waited a long time for this movie, and it was nothing that we were expecting. There are things in it that I love. It's a beautiful looking film, but overall, it's just not quite Star Wars material. It's very hard after the trilogy to start over. And even if you were to start over, it's just a very awkward film. If there's one word that describes the prequels perfectly, it's awkward. There would be parts that are working really good, and then somebody comes in and ruins a scene with a bad performance, or the animation is weird, or it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. I don't think Jar Jar really deserves all the blame. It's not entirely his fault. There was some big issues with the film besides that. Anyway, Attack of the Clones comes out 3 years later. And now, at the time, I liked Attack of the Clones a lot more than The Phantom Menace. Now I sort of like them about the same. I've grown to like them both. But there was a time when I really loved Attack of the Clones. I thought, oh, this is one of the best movies. It's great. And now you watch it now, and it's just a little bit long. Which is, Star Wars movies shouldn't be that long. They shouldn't be 2 hours and 20 minutes. You got to get in there like 2 hours and 10, 2 hours and 5 minutes. Because they should be relatively simple stories. This is a problem that continued with the prequels and much more in the sequels too, where there's just too many characters, too much going on, and Star Wars has become a little too big for the cinematic art form because of the amount of characters and the amount of stuff going on, and that was a reason why the sequels had some work cut out for them. Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005. We saw it on opening day, like we saw the other ones. That one was great. I felt like that was the one that was the most like the original trilogy. And it was a good movie in its own right. It wasn't just a good part of the series, because the other ones are okay parts of the series, but this one was actually a great movie in its own right. And we thought that was it. But wait, there's more. We got the news during Hurricane Sandy in 2012, which was a tough time to get it because there was no reception. We weren't getting the internet. We were having a lot of trouble getting connections. And we found out, my brother John actually got a text from his friend. He's like, did you hear the news that Lucasfilm was sold to Disney, and the new head of Lucasfilm is Kathleen Kennedy, and they're going to make a 7, 8, and 9? Because we've been hearing 7, 8, 9 rumors since 1983. And you always took them with a grain of salt. It was always, well, we'll see it when we see it. I don't believe it. I don't buy it. But it sounded too ridiculous, a rumor, to be a rumor. It sounded too out there to be false. And it turns out it was true. And we waited about 3 years for the first of the sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens, which is a movie that I have to say, my feelings on it then, my feelings on it now. I liked it a lot more back then. And now when I watch it, I think to myself, the first hour is one of the best first hours of a Star Wars movie. Because you're meeting everybody again, you're meeting all the new characters. Overall, I really liked the film, even though the second half of the film sorts to get very formulaic and not just a derivative of A New Hope, but other movies too. And I just felt like, well, we've seen this in Star Wars, and we've seen this a lot of other places. The guys on a mission going to blow up the base, you know. It's been done. But the cool thing about The Force Awakens, and this was a cool thing about A New Hope, is that if you hadn't seen Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and you just for a few years watched A New Hope by itself, you would make up your own movie in your head. You would, I used to read some of the Marvel comics, I used to play with the toys, and before I saw Empire Strikes Back, I would kind of make up my own sequels and my own versions of Star Wars in my mind. And that's the beauty of a first film in a trilogy, because you keep thinking to yourself, gee, I wonder what's going to happen next. Wouldn't it be cool if they did this? Wouldn't it be cool if they did that? And that's the beauty of a first movie. Like, you think of the first Matrix, it was the same deal, where you watch the first Matrix, and I had some major issues with the ending. I didn't like the idea of basically the heroes of the film walking into a room and executing innocent security guards. Like, that left a very bad taste in my mouth, and I still, to this day, I don't like the end of The Matrix. That's what I think keeps it from being a great film. But one of the things I liked about it was, at the end, when you see Neo flying towards the screen, you know, at one point he's afraid of heights, and then at the end of the film, he's flying. I'm like, wow, Matrix 2 is going to be amazing. I can't wait to see what they're going to do with it, because you're making up your own movie in your head. And then when the boys came out with, not boys anymore, but when the Wachowski kids came out with the sequels, they said, no, this is what Matrix 2 is. This is what Matrix 3 is. Whether you like it or not, this is what it is. And that's the problem with sequels, because somebody comes along and says, well, you wanted this, this, and this, but this is what we did. And this is what recently happened with Wonder Woman 1984. A lot of people said, well, Wonder Woman 2 could have been this and could have been that. And the people that made Wonder Woman 1984 said, no, Wonder Woman 2 is going to be this. And this is very weird. And that's what happened with the Matrix movies. And that's the problem with sequels. Sometimes sequels can be great. And other times they can just really drop the ball. And when talking about dropping the ball, going into a segue for The Last Jedi, I'm actually going to get in trouble for this. I love The Last Jedi. I think it's a great film. I think it's the best of the sequel trilogy, in my opinion. There are things in it that annoy me. There are things that frustrate me, like most Star Wars movies. But overall, I liked what they were doing with it. I thought it was very different and very interesting. But again, where is this going? What is this going to lead to? Because I'm thinking, man, episode 9 is going to be amazing because it's going to build off of this and it's going to be great. No, when Rian Johnson handed off the rally baton to J.J. Abrams once again, J.J. Abrams became something that he was never good at, a closer of a story. He's very good at opening things. He's very good at the mystery box. But the endings, even within his own films, his endings start to lose me. The ending of The Force Awakens started to lose me. The ending of Mission Impossible, the ending of Super 8, the endings of his movies start to... I mean, I don't end up walking out of the movie disappointed or hating the movie, but I feel like, well, gee, I think they could have gone another direction with this thing. So Rise of Skywalker is a very strange film. It's probably the weirdest of all the Star Wars films, even weirder than The Phantom Menace, which is a feat. But there's just so many strange things in it and odd things in it and things that don't make sense and things that don't get resolved. But there's also beautiful moments like when they raise the X-Wing out of the water in Act 2 and a couple of other things that really make me like the movie, even though there's things that the movie does that really pisses me off. Like bringing back Palpatine was a really bad idea. And the way they did it, again, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Like the prequels, awkward execution. The sequels, for the most part, pretty good execution, but the last one was so prequely. It was as if it was the most George Lucas of the new Star Wars movies. A lot of people said Rogue One was very much like George Lucas. By the way, I love Rogue One and I love Solo. Rogue One is not like a George Lucas movie. I think the one that most resembles George Lucas of the new films is Rise of Skywalker, because it has the corny stuff and the awkward stuff and the stuff that seems interesting but doesn't go anywhere, like everything with Poe and that lady that went absolutely nowhere. But it's got a lot of endearing moments. It's got a lot of heartwarming moments. It's got a lot of comedy and cool stuff. And the ending. And it's got Lando. And it's got all that stuff. So overall, it's all right. But, you know, where do we go from here? You know, who's to say? Will there be a 10, 11, and 12? I think so. In 20 years, we'll watch, you know, old Daisy Ridley and old John Boyega and all the bunch come back. But by that point in time, here's what they should do. They should do, if they are going to do any more sequels to this trilogy, do each sequel as a limited series on Disney+. Like, make episode 10 a 6-part show with maybe the same director, maybe different directors. But the story needs to breathe. The Rise of Skywalker is too busy. It's got too many characters, too much going on. If they make an episode 10, if they give us a big, long form to play with, you can get a lot more done in that space and time. And I think the technology just wasn't quite there yet to do the sequel trilogy that way. But I think, as evidenced by The Mandalorian, you can do this in the future. You can actually have a first season that's good, but is a little smaller, and then the next season will be bigger and bigger and bigger. As the technology gets cheaper and easier to use and more user-friendly, you can do anything. But there's just one thing I wanted to show you guys before we go. This is a possession that I really like. This was our Star Wars Trilogy box set, which we got Christmas of 1992. The original trilogy on VHS. You can see there's a couple of signatures there. We've got Dave Prowse, Peter Mayhew, Richard LaParmenter, who's Admiral Motti. He was at the New York Big Apple Con, and he was at the table with Dave Prowse and Peter Mayhew. So I didn't want to not get him to sign it. Of course, you know, I want to include Admiral Motti on there. And one of the best signatures on here, if you could see, well, we got Kenny Baker, R2-D2. And again, this thing needs more signatures. I got to start going to the conventions once COVID ends and hope to meet more of the Star Wars bunch so they can sign this. One of my favorite signatures on here is Billy D. Williams. As he was signing his name, the pen broke. And the only thing that I can describe it as the Lando moment of coolness. He's like, let me do some artwork. So the spilled ink he actually turned into a little drawing on here. So it's a piece of modern art from Billy D. Williams now, as opposed to just a signature from Billy D. The Star Wars folks that I've met over the years, those guys like Kenny and Peter and all those guys, they're great guys. They were always nice to us. Very sad that a few of them have been passing on lately because these films were made a long time ago. But they've always been pleasant. They've always been kind people. And hope to meet more if the conventions and things start opening up. I'd really love to go Star Wars Celebration again. I went in 2002, and it was incredible. But I would love to go again. It was great, Star Wars Celebration. If you ever get a chance to go, if you're a Star Wars fan, I recommend it. Because it was the same feeling I had years ago at the Star Trek conventions. It was the same thing, where it's almost like there's like there's thousands of people, 5,000 to 6,000 people sometimes at a time in these places. And they're all there for one purpose. They all love Star Wars enough that they bought tickets to go to a convention. And you meet people from all over the world. We met people from Russia. We met people from Ireland, and all parts of the world had come to Indiana that year to celebrate Star Wars. But one last thing about the haikus. That I did do spin-offs. I haven't done one for Mandalorian yet, and I don't think I did one for Solo either. Solo doesn't need a haiku. But I will probably work on some for the Mandalorian before the 3rd season. You know, we'll see how we can do that. It's a little trickier when it's a series, because to sum up the seasons in 3 sentences is a little trickier than summing up a movie. But I had great fun writing these, and again, this was a project that was 6 years in the making. So we're going to be signing off now. There's going to be a few more poems today and a couple of classic poems as well. Thank you. And as always, may the Force be with you.